White House correspondent for the New York Times. And Michael, I've been around this too long. I look at the numbers and where they are. Ossoff is one. Pastor Warnock is one. It's a 50-50 Senate. Do you recall when that last was, 2001, for 5 months?
I recall it. I don't know that I was I was still covering state politics and state government in Virginia at the time, so I wasn't here in Washington focused on it. But look, it's going to be really interesting, and I think it gives the Democrats control. It doesn't mean that the Democrats get everything they want. There are clearly enough people, enough Democrats in the Senate who aren't going to go along with everything that Joe Biden wants to do, or that the rest of the Democratic Party wants to do. And so there's it gives a lot of power to the handful of people in the middle to kind of swing one way or the other.
Yeah, I do not believe the filibuster will be repealed now, because the filibuster would require all 50 Democrats and the vice president to do it. And Joe Manchin, I believe, is a man of his word, so he won't do it. That means reconciliation is the only path forward for anything that's remarkably liberal. So I expect taxes to skyrocket and the Green New Deal taxes to be among them, and perhaps immigration reform. But what about the House, Michael Scheer? It's a 7-person or 8-person majority. I don't know how they're going to decide Iowa and New York. It's not a lot of room to maneuver, and a lot of those people have to worry about redistricting.
No, absolutely, and in both chambers, everybody's eyes are going to be on 2022 because the majorities are so thin. So the Democrats have a couple of years. It reminds me actually of the first couple of years of the Obama presidency, although obviously bigger majorities there. But the thing that Democrats often criticize President Obama about is that he didn't move quickly enough to get some of his top priorities done. I mean, obviously, healthcare was the one thing they focused on. But look, I suspect that Joe Biden will come out of the gate really fast and really strong, and throw a lot of things at the wall to see how much that they can get through. And some of it will pass, some of it will not, and we'll have a couple of years here in Washington that's pretty interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think we'll see corporate taxes go up, the individual rates go up as well, and I believe a carbon tax. Now, I'm looking as we speak at Ballotpedia, the map for the Senate in 2022. And, in the Senate in 2022, 13 seats are held by Democrats, 14 now, and 20 held by Republicans. And the places Republicans can pick one up will be Pastor Warnock has to run again in Georgia, and we've got Michael Bennet in Colorado and Mark Kelly in Arizona, possibly Catherine Cortez Maggio, maybe Ron Wyden, maybe Patty Murray, but it's not a particularly good map. The place that the Republicans will be focusing, I think, is on the House with redistricting, Michael Scheer.
Right. So I think they'll be. I mean, my guess is they'll be focused on both. There's, I think, a lot of anticipation on the House side that they're just literally within striking distance, just a handful of seats. Now, the problem for the Republicans in the House is that the pickups that they made in this last race in 2020 in the House were tended to be the easier pickups, right? The ones that maybe the House in places where a Democrat wouldn't necessarily have sort of been a comfortable fit anyway. Look, a lot depends on what Donald Trump does during these next 2 years. Does the Republican Party continue to do large chunks of the Republican Party, let me say it that way, continue to be sort of enthralled to him, and how much influence does he have? And, or does the Republican Party kind of revert to a more traditional Republican establishment kind of party? And I don't think we know the answer to that yet.
We don't, but the opposition party is easier to organize, as Kevin McCarthy learned in the House, than it is the majority party. And while there might be primaries, I want Pat Toomey to run again, and maybe he won't because he fears a Donald Trump challenge from someone. But there might be Trumpist candidates in some primaries. But generally speaking, the Republicans got back one House after 2 years of Obama. They got one House back after 2 years of Clinton. They never got either house back under Jimmy Carter until Jimmy Carter was himself thrown out in 1980.
Right.
But the record is pretty good for the off year in the first
That's
2 years
true.
of a presidential election.
That is true, and you know, I mean, I'm sure listeners to your show will, this is not any surprise to them, but you know, it often becomes that first election after a new president is elected often becomes a referendum on that president, and you know, depending on how Joe Biden comports himself in terms of policy and what he pursues and how far he goes. I mean, does he do the things you suggest? Does he raise taxes in a lot of different ways? Does he pursue more leftist environmental policies that could annoy a lot of people? I mean, I think those are the kinds of questions that a race like these races in 2022 will get nationalized around that question, and that, you know, often in the first 2 years often leads to the voters saying, you know what, we're gonna put a check on the person that's currently in the White House, and elections don't go too well for them.
Yeah. Now, I also think the most interesting thing will be candidate recruitment. Michael Scheer, Democrats. Stacey Abrams is the winner yesterday. She did a terrific job for 10 years. She put her mind to it. She flipped Georgia from red to blue. Now, there needs to be similar young Republicans emerge in these states who are not from the fringe, who are from the center right, preferably veterans, preferably diverse. And, do you think they will change party chair next week in Florida? I don't think so, but I want to know what you hear.
I haven't heard anything about Florida specifically, been focused elsewhere, but I do agree with you that the candidate recruitment is key, I think, on both sides. And you have pressures in the Democratic Party. You have the far left, progressive side that is continuing to make the argument that the way you win these races is by doubling and tripling down on the far left, on their progressive ideas. Obviously, in the Republican Party, you have Donald Trump and sort of that wing of the party saying, wanting to push that, that ideology and that loyalty to Trump. And I think both parties, the challenge for both parties is to, in some sense, reject doing that and accept in places where it absolutely makes sense, and try to capture and get back to some of the kind of middle of the country, the middle America that people where in both parties they're where the numbers are.
Now, the last question is: Georgia the new Virginia? In other words, Ohio and Missouri went from being purple to being red, and Virginia went from being red to being blue. What about Georgia?
I don't know. I lived and covered Virginia for a long time, and I've been pretty amazed when I mentioned when I was down covering state politics in 2001, the Republicans had a literally 2/3 majority in the House of Delegates in Virginia, and now it's completely flipped the other way. So it has been an interesting and fascinating demographic shift and political shift in Virginia. I'm not as knowledgeable about Georgia, although I will say I'm somewhat skeptical. I mean, one of the things I always said in Virginia was you can't judge by one election. You have to see a series of elections go in the same direction before you can sort of say that something fundamental has changed. And I think we don't know that yet. I mean, let's look at the next time there's a gubernatorial race, or the next time there's as you said, Warnock is going to have to run again. Does he win? Do House Republicans in Georgia lose? Those are the questions I think we have to answer. We don't know the question. We don't know the answer yet.
Yeah, I think from the Republicans, I think Doug Collins will take out Governor Kemp in a primary, and they just need to recruit a young, dynamic veteran in Georgia to lead the way against Raphael Warnock. I mean, that's if I'm king of the forest, not queen, not duke, not earl, that's what I see happening. Kemp is broken.
Personality matters. The person you pick matters, absolutely, and nobody is ever going to convince me otherwise. But it's also true that demographics and kind of the broader sweep of what's going on in a place matters. And and I just don't know is it possible that different group of people has been activated in Georgia? It's possible.
It's possible. And watch Colorado. If they come up with anything other than an old white male to run against Michael Bennett, That's really pickup number one. Michael Scheer, thank